Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Magic the Conversation. Today, we're going to go over the expansion called The Dark. The Dark came out in 1994, on August 1st. And it would be a somewhat continuation from the Antiquity storyline after the Brothers' War, when Urza had used the great spell to win the war. It created this massive explosion over Dominaria, and the ashes blotted out the sun and cast a darkness over the land. Hence, this is what the set is named after, and the set also explores some of the darker sides of magic, as well as the result of not having any sunlight in the world for a period of time. And we would see in a future set that it would be a much more extreme result from that. Go ahead and get started with the cards themselves. The set for the set symbol for the expansion is a crescent moon. We'll start with Amnesia, 6 mana sorcery. Look at target player's hand. Target player discards all non-land cards from their hand. That's pretty good. Blue, giving blue discard. I mean, the mana cost is really big, but if you're able to have some sort of mana ramp, which there was plenty of, even when the Dark was a new set, you had the Moxes, you had Black Lotus, and if you were able to cheat out Amnesia, so to speak, your opponent dumps everything but their land in their hands. So it's almost like discarding their entire hand because they have nothing to cast except for their land, and then they're forced to draw the top card of their deck each time. When one has witnessed the unspeakable, 'tis sometimes better to forget. From Vervamon the Elder. We don't know what this guy saw, but he had a lobotomy, so to speak, and removed the core memory of his brain. Angry Mob, 4 mana, 2/2. They get +X/+X, and they have Trample. Trample, again, is not a common ability for white to have for white's creatures. During your turn, the stars below are both equal to the total number of swamps all your opponents controls. During other players' turns, star equals 0. So during other players' turns, they're just 2/2s. But during your turn, they get +X/+X equal to the number of all swamps your opponents control. If you play, there will be a card in Magic set called Urborg, which is a legendary land that makes all other lands swamps in addition to their land types. This is a good combo with Angry Mob, because then Angry Mob's going to get +X/+X, where X is equal to the total lands all your opponents have, since everything is a swamp. I do own Angry Mob, but I never actually used them in a deck. Apprentice Wizard, 3 mana, 0/1. You pay a blue and tap them to add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can do this anytime. Blue getting mana ramp. That's another ability that blue would not receive for quite some time. In more recent sets, blue's gotten this ability back, but for either artifacts, instants, or sorceries. The fact that it's a 0/1, though, kind of, it's easily killed. It's a poor man's mana dork. But it does add a ton for its cost if it survives. Ashes to Ashes, 3 mana. Ashes to Ashes exiles 2 target non-artifact creatures from the game and does 5 damage to you. So at the cost of 5 damage, you remove 2 threats for the price of 1. That's card advantage. All rivers eventually run to the sea. My job is to sort out who goes first. Maven Odana, Memoirs of a Soldier. Next, Ball Lightning, perhaps one of the most famous classic red creatures. For 3 red, it was a 6/1 with Trample. It can attack the turn it enters the battlefield, meaning it had haste before haste was actually a keyword. However, you have to sacrifice it at the end of your turn. But if your opponent doesn't have any creatures out, 3 mana for 6 damage is a good cost. And the Ball Lightning had Trample too, so even if they had a blocker out, the Ball Lightning would almost always kill the blocker and then at least get a little bit of damage through. Very good for burn decks back in the day. If you ran a mono red deck, you almost always had Ball Lightning if you were going for power and speed. Currently my favorite card in the set. Banshee, 0/1, 4 mana. You pay X and tap it. It deals X damage. Half of it rounded up to you, and the other half rounded down to any other target. Some say Banshees are the hounds of death, paying to herd their prey to the arms of their master. I have Banshee, but I never used it in a deck. If you had Circle of Protection black and you used Banshee's ability, you could use the Circle of Protection to stop the damage that your own Banshee would deal to you, and you'd still be able to get the other part of the target. I like the artwork for Banshee better than I like Ball Lightning, but Ball Lightning was strictly better, so Ball Lightning's still going to get my favorite for now. Barl's Cage, 4 mana artifact. You pay 3. Target creature does not untap as normal during its controller's next untap step. For a dozen years, the cage had held Lord Ith, but as the Pretender Marisol's power weakened, so did the bars. I didn't know this card existed. It's okay. You are able to lock creatures down, but they have to be tapped in order for them to be locked down. Blood Moon. This is an extremely good card in competitive Magic, and well, all terms of Magic actually. 3 mana enchantment. All non-basic lands are now basic mountains. Heavy light flooded across the landscape, cloaking everything in deep crimson. Non-basic lands are any of the lands that are not a swamp, island, forest, plains, mountain. They would eventually introduce wastelands, or wastes, which only tap for colorless, but that would not be until many years later. If your opponent is running dual lands or any land that does anything different, like the factories or the power plants that we reveal in the older sets, Blood Moon just turns them into mountains. If your opponent is running 5-color decks, Blood Moon would change their non-basic lands to mountains, and they would be only locked to red mana. Very powerful. It could lock your opponent out of playing the game, period. It saw a lot of play in all formats, and still does to this day because it has been reprinted multiple times. Blood of the Martyr, triple white. For the remainder of the turn, you may redirect damage done to any number of creatures to yourself instead. The Willow knows what the Storm does not, that the power to endure harm outlives the power to inflict it. So if you really want to save your creatures, you'll take the damage instead of your creatures. Normally you want to have your creatures take the damage for you instead, But if you really, really, really need your creatures to live, that's the only reason I could see using Blood of the Martyr. Bog Imp. 1/1 flying. On guard for larger dangers, we underestimated the power and speed of the Imp's muck-crusted claws. The artwork is phenomenal. Ron Spencer is actually my favorite Magic the Gathering artist. Big fan of his work. His artwork was one of the styles that drew me to start playing Magic, period. So I think this was one of the first cards he illustrated, because I don't remember any cards of his from a prior set. If Bog Imp isn't bad, but it's not a good card either. But the artwork, again, I can't say it enough, is really good. Bog Rats. 1 mana 1/1 rats. They cannot be blocked by walls. Their stench was vile and strong enough, but not nearly as powerful as their hunger. Again, Ron Spencer making rats look scary. There's even a baby rat here that just looks like it came out of a horror movie. Bone Flute. 3 mana. You pay 2 and tap it. All creatures get power -1 until end of turn. After the Battle of Pitdown, Lady Ursnell fashioned the first search instrument out of Lord Ursnell's left leg. Awkward card. That's all I'll say about that. The Book of Wrath. 6 mana. Pay 2 and pay 2 life to draw a card. Effects that prevent or redirect damage may not be used to counter this loss of life. So it's an artifact that kind of does what Greed does. Greed was an enchantment in the prior set from Legends, where you paid a black, pay 2 life, draw a card. This is a very slower version of it, but it gives any color access to it. You don't have to use black mana in order to get anything out of it. And it does. Greed only costs 1 black to activate, whereas the Book of Wrath costs 2 to activate per 2 life. Brainwash. For 1 white. Enchanted creature may not attack unless its controller pays 3 in addition to any other costs that are required for the creature to attack. They're not your friends. They despise you. I'm the only one you can count on. Trust me. Gaslighting was around long before that term became mainstream in media today. I already see this set has a lot to do with also with the mind. Brothers of Fire. 3 mana 2/2. You pay 3. Brothers of Fire does 1 damage to any target and 1 damage to you. Fire is never a gentle master. Are they still brothers? No, they're a shaman. They look like 2 villains out of like Marvel Comics. I did have the card. It was in one of my first red decks. But at the time I did not use it because, or if I did use it, I rarely used the ability because I was always so afraid of cards that hurt myself. And then I learned that in Magic, it's okay to like take damage here and there, as long as the damage isn't lethal or it puts you in like a lethal situation where your opponent can defeat you on that turn or next turn. It's a good card once you have the mana to freely spend and the life to pay. However, if you give it lifelink or spirit link, where when this creature deals damage, you gain that much life. Using that ability, it'll deal 1 damage to any target and 1 damage to you. It's dealing 2 damage at once, meaning you'll gain 2 life, but you'll only take 1 damage. So every time they use that ability, you'll actually gain a life from it instead. So giving them lifelink would be a good combo. I don't know if I still own the card or not, but I would make like a red-white deck out of that I would make a bunch of red creatures that do self-harm, like I said, but I would give them lifelink to where it either counteracted or even benefited from life gain from dealing damage to myself. Carnivore's Plant, 4 mana, 4/5. It's a wall. It's a plant wall with Defender. It doesn't do anything else. It had a mouth like that of a great beast and gnashed its teeth as it strained to reach us. I am thankful it possessed no means of locomotion. From Veramon the Elder. The artwork is good by Quentin Hoover. I think Quentin Hoover does great like artwork for Green. He did that fairy in the Legend set that I was really praising. I feel like there's more to the card than is just what's pictured, but the Carnivore's Plant looks really cool. I had it in my deck. I didn't care that it couldn't attack at all. I like the artwork so much, so it was in my first green deck. I am gonna have to choose Carnivore's Plant over Ball Lightning. I know it's crazy. Ball Lightning is strictly a better card. However, this card will block Ball Lightning, and you only take 1 damage from it. They'll both die afterwards, but I just like I like Venus Flytraps and Pitcher Plants in real life, so there aren't many cards that represent that in Magic, and Carnivore's Plant is one of them. Cave People, 3 mana, 1/4. I've never seen this card before. If it's declared as an attacker, they get +1, -2 until end of turn. So that would make them a 2/2 when they become an attacker. You can pay triple or 2 red and 1, tap them. Target creature gets Mountain Walk until end of turn. Land walk abilities are still present. City of Shadows. You tap it, sacrifice a creature, and then remove it from the game. Put a counter on City of Shadows. Then you could also tap it to add X colorless mana to your mana pool, where X is the number of counters on City of Shadows. I did not know this card existed either. Exiling one of your creatures from the game is a heavy cost because there's no way of really getting that creature back. But if you need the mana ramp, and depending on what creatures you throw, if you have a token, a deck that puts out a lot of creature tokens, City of Shadows, you can sacrifice the tokens and you'll get mana each turn that way without sacrificing your board, so to speak. I did not know City of Shadows was a card. Cleansing, 3 white. All lands in play are destroyed. Players may prevent cleansing from destroying each land they choose by paying 1 life for each land they control. So it's 1 mana less than Armageddon, but it is 3 white, so most of the time you'd be using just a white deck to use it. And each player pays life for each land they want to keep out. Sure, it would create some chaos in a group game. Coal Golem, 5 mana, 3/3. You can pay 3 and sacrifice him to add 3 red to your mana pool. So if you really need red mana, because you're not gaining anything out of it, like you're not gaining any extra mana. You're paying 3 and getting 3 back, but you're getting 3 red. If you're using Hearthstone, which reduces the activated abilities of artifacts by 1, then you'll get plus mana. But once you're at 5 mana, like, I don't think the ramp is too. There are much better ramping cards. 3 such creatures stood burning at the crest of the hill. Only seconds later, the fireball struck our front line. Lydia, Countess Brelis. Artwork is cool. It reminds me of like a B movie, Lava Monster, or Marvel villain, or DC. Curse Artifact, 4 mana, enchant artifact. At the beginning of the upkeep of the controller of enchanted artifact, they may choose to sacrifice the artifact. If they do not sacrifice the artifact, Curse Artifact does 2 damage to them. Voska feared the artifact had come too easily. It is a slow way for black if they want to destroy an artifact. But if the opponent can afford to pay the life, the artifact will still be on the battlefield each turn. Dance of Many. These look like seahorse, sea monkeys, brine shrimp. I don't know. For 2 blue enchantment, when Dance of Many enters the battlefield, choose a creature in play. Then put a token on each creature in play and treat it as though they are an exact copy of the chosen creature. If Dance of Many leaves the battlefield, remove the creature from the game. If the chosen creature leaves play, destroy Dance of Many. If you do not pay 2 blue during your upkeep, Dance of Many is destroyed. It's an interesting card. But that's only for the creatures who enter the battlefield. Whoever comes out, I think, stays the same. Let's read the updated rules. When Dance of Many enters the battlefield, create a token that's a copy of target non-token creature. Oh, I read that completely wrong. Yeah, sorry, I read that completely wrong. When Dance of Many enters the battlefield, create a token that's a copy of target non-token creature. When Dance of Many leaves the battlefield, you exile the token. If the token leaves the battlefield, sacrifice Dance of Many. All right, so you only get a copy of a target creature. Other than, I don't know why I read it the way that I did earlier. Dark Heart of the Wood. A black and a green enchantment. You may sacrifice forest to gain 3 life. This counts as both a black and a green card. Now, I know they didn't put this rule text on the gold cards from Legends. Legends only had gold creatures. The Dark would have gold instant sorceries and enchantments. Even the goblins shun this haunted place where the tree limbs twist in agony and the ground seems to scuttle under your feet. This forest doesn't look bad to me. Dark Sphere. This artifact doesn't cost anything. You can cast it for 0. Tap it. Sacrifice Dark Sphere to prevent half of the damage done to you by a single source rounded down. I did not know this card existed. I was struck senseless for a moment, but revived when the strange curiosity I carried fell to the ground, screaming like a dying animal. Barl, Lord Ith. Deep Water. For 2 blue. Pay a blue. All mana-producing lands you control provide blue instead of their normal mana until end of turn. It's mana fixing for blue. If you really need blue mana for your lands, Deep Water will give it to you. I like the Hammerhead Shark, but that's the only thing about the card I like. Because you need blue to cast this card. So once you have 2 blue, I don't think this ability is relevant at all. So I can't think of any single use for this card. Diabolic Machine. I had this in my artifact deck. My first one. Or it was in one of my first decks. 7 mana, 4/4. That is a lot, but you can pay 3 to regenerate it. The bullets of our ballista smashed into the monstrous thing, but our hopes died in our chests as its gears continued turning. Sefti Mokul, the Fall of Osor. Looks like this knight's gonna get grinded. Drowned. 2 mana, 1/1. You can pay a black to regenerate them. We asked Captain Soul what became of Seraphina, but all he said was ships that go down should not come back up. So this guy looks like a modern sailor who drowned. This guy's been in the water for a long time. This guy looks like a leprechaun, but these are just underwater pirates. They're actually just they should be zombie pirates, but they're just zombies. Dust to Dust. This artwork's pretty primitive. 3 mana, you exile 2 artifacts from the game. Turvish never noticed that the amulet had vanished. It had disappeared not only from his possession, but from his memory as well. Another good card advantage if your opponent is very artifact heavy. Eater of the Dead. 5 mana. The card looks sick, actually. Good artwork. For free, take one creature from any graveyard and remove it from the game. Untap Eater of the Dead. Even the putrid muscles of the dead can provide strength to those loathsome enough to consume them. He is now a horror. If Eater of the Dead is tapped, exile a target creature from a graveyard and untap Eater of the Dead. He can exile an opponent's, like, each creature from their graveyard, but he has to be tapped to do it, if according to the updated rules. I never knew the card existed. Electric Eel for a 1/1 eel for 1 blue. You've got a funny face. Looks like an old man sneering. Get off my lawn. Get out of my ocean. For double red, he gets +2 power until end of turn. Then he does 1 damage to you. He also does 1 damage when he enters the battlefield. Aggressive choice if you are running a blue and red deck, but he keeps hurting you too. Elves of the Deep Shadow. Pretty good artwork for like a portrait of a person. For 1 green, you can tap them to add 1 black to your mana pool, but they do 1 damage to you. So they're like a Land of War elf, but they produce black instead of green, and they do 1 damage to you, but they do ramp you for some mana. Erosion, triple blue. I had this card in my first blue deck. Enchanted land is destroyed unless its controller pays 1 or 1 life during their upkeep. Effects that prevent or redirect damage may not be used to counter this loss of life. It's like a slow way for blue to destroy lands or deal direct damage to their opponent. My first blue deck was a lot of enchantments that I would put on their creatures, their artifacts, their lands, and they had to pay a bunch of mana, and then they had to choose what they wanted to keep and what they wanted to sacrifice, or they'd take damage each turn. Eternal Flame. For 4 mana, Eternal Flame does an amount of damage to your opponent equal to the number of mountains you control, but it also does half that amount of damage to you rounded up. I didn't know this card existed either. But if it kills your opponent and you'll survive, then it's worth using. Exorcist for 2 white. Pay a white and tap in a colorless and tap them. Destroy target black creature. Though they often bore little greater charm than the demons they battled, exorcists were always welcome in Scarwood. Artwork's pretty primitive. I think that's the same guy who did the artifact up above, Drew Tucker. It looks like blood got splashed on the card. I gotta respond to something. Fasting for 1 white. You may choose to skip your draw step. If you do, you gain 2 life. If you draw a card for any reason, fasting is destroyed. During your upkeep, put a hunger counter on fasting. When fasting has 5 hunger counters on it, it is destroyed. So instead of drawing a card, you can gain 2 life during your upkeep. And if you go 5 turns without drawing a card, you'll gain a total of 10 life 2 each turn, but then Fasting goes to the graveyard. Oops. Felwar Stone, 2 mana artifact. You tap it to add 1 mana to your mana pool. This mana may be any color that your lands could already produce. Great card because, first of all, it only costs 2 mana, so it's like a mana rock. And it boosts you ahead by 1 mana. And it doesn't even damage you or anything. But the only drawback is if you already don't have the colors of land out that you need, then the stone only puts you ahead by 1. What do you have that I cannot obtain from Marisol called the Pretender? There's a card, I think from Arabian Nights, there was City of Brass, where it tapped for 1 mana of any color, but then it dealt 1 damage to you. If you have City of Brass out and you have the Felwar Stone out, you're able to tap the Felwar Stone for 1 mana of any color with it, and then you wouldn't take the damage where you would normally tap for City of Brass. Oh, man, I keep messing up today. I'm sorry. It taps for 1 land of any color that your opponent's lands can produce. Never mind. I mean, it's still a good card because it still sets you ahead by 1 mana, but it's not good as I am making it out to be. Hey, Kat, welcome in. Welcome in. You can still call me Justin. You can call me Swamp King, King Swamp. You can call me whatever you want. Welcome in. Welcome in. I'm being a hot mess right now, and I have you to thank for it. Just kidding. Festival for 1 white. Opponent may not declare an attack this turn. Play only during your opponent's upkeep phase. So at the beginning of your opponent's turn, you cast Festival, then they have to skip their combat phase. Juicy J. Thank you. Thank you. I do like Juicy J. He's one of my favorite rappers. Only after the townsfolk had drawn us into their merry celebration do we discover that their holiday rituals held a deeper purpose. It's a scary looking jester. Fire and Brimstone for 5 mana instant. Fire Brimstone does 4 damage to target player and 4 damage to you. Can only be used during a turn in which a player has attacked you. Direct damage with white. Very rare to see. Very rare to see. Fire Drake. 3 mana, flying. 1 red. For every red that you pay, it gets +1 attack until end of turn. However, you can only pay 1 red a turn to do it. So at the most, it can be a 2/2 flyer at the cost of 1 red. The artwork is cool. But other than that, it's just like a regular little flying creature. Fissure, 5 mana, destroy target creature or land. Must not all things at the last be swallowed up in death. From Plato. Having red being able to destroy a creature outright is very rare too. And it cannot be regenerated. Flood. This was in my first blue deck. Pay a blue to cast it, and then at any time you pay 2 blue, target non-flying creature becomes tapped. A dash of cool water does wonders to clear a cluttered battlefield from Viveki Ragnar, witches, and more. There's a black cat up in the tree, and this poor soul's house is flooded. Fortunately, this is a real-life tragedy that happens around the world every day. But it's a good card if your opponent isn't using creatures with flying. Fountain of Youth. It's an artifact. It doesn't cost any mana at all. But you do have to pay 2 and tap it to gain 1 life. The fountain had stood in the town square for centuries, but only the pigeons knew its secret. Because who drinks fountain water? Like, people throw coins in there. Kids probably jump in and piss in it. I don't know. I won't drink from fountain water, but pigeons would. So the flavor text for this card is pretty good. Back in the day, this was a good card for life gain, but nowadays, even though it costs 0 to cast, the 2 mana tap for just 1 life has been outdated. Frankenstein's Monster. I did not know this card existed. He costs 2 black and X. When he enters the battlefield, if you do not take X creatures from your graveyard and remove them from the game, then he is sacrificed. For each creature removed from your graveyard in this way, you may choose to give Frankenstein's Monster a permanent +2 to his attack, +1/+1, or +2 to his toughness. That's a cool card. I did not know that existed, and I kind of want to make a deck that has like all the classic Universal monsters. They have plenty of vampires in Magic. They have werewolves, Wolfman. They have mummies, even though the only mummy we've seen was that Cyclopean mummy, which was such a piece of crap. We have some the creature from the Black Lagoon could be some scary looking merfolk. So I want this card. But I only play Magic digitally now. I still own a majority of my physical collection, but it's all like boxed up and everything. I don't really have I could make time for it, but the way that I have right now, what am I trying to say? I don't make enough time for me to go like to some place where people play. My local card shop closed about 9 years ago or something like that, and I love that place. It was called Seventh Inning Stretch, and that's where I made a lot of friends. And that's where I dominantly played Magic when I didn't play it in school. Gaia's Touch. For 2 green, you may cast an additional land during each of your turns, but that land has to be a forest. At any time, you may sacrifice this enchantment to add 2 green to your mana pool. This was a really speedy way to get more lands out, and then if you really needed that extra 2 mana, you could always sacrifice the enchantment for the extra 2 green. Good card for green. Ghost Ship. 4 mana, 2/4 flying. He regenerates for triple blue. A lot of blue creatures didn't have regeneration, so that Phantom Prow split the storm as lightning cast its long shadow on the battlefield below. Morelli Gaetani from the Valerian. Artwork is cool. Ghost Ship. Ghost Ship's also a good horror movie. Giant Shark. Here's Jaws. 6 mana, 4/4. If Giant Shark blocks or becomes blocked by a creature that has already taken damage this turn, he gets +2 attack and trample until end of turn. He cannot attack unless the opponent controls at least 1 island, and if you don't have any islands on the battlefield, he is immediately sacrificed. A lot of drawbacks for this card. Magic does not have a lot of sharks. At least back in the day it didn't. It has quite a few now. But I like the artwork on it. And Jaws is one of my favorite movies. So when I first saw this card, I didn't care how bad it sucked. I wanted it. And that's... I had built the other blue deck that had a bunch of sea serpents that made my opponent's lands into islands, guaranteeing my creatures being able to attack. Just for memory's sake, I'm going to have Giant Shark be my favorite card over Carnivorous Plant. Goblin Cave for 3 red or 2 red and a colorless. Put it on a land. If the enchanted land is a mountain, all your goblins get +2 toughness. The stench of countless generations of unspeakable activities was enough to loosen both our footing and our stomachs. You know, goblins be doing some nasty stuff in those caves. Giving goblins +2 toughness makes them very harder to kill, and goblins normally swarm the opponent with a good amount of offense. So if those goblins survive, and they'll be able to live next turn to swing with even more goblins. But I think there is one card in here that actually gives plus more to their power instead of their toughness. Goblin digging team. I can't talk. Goblin digging team. Sacrifice them to destroy target wall. Oh, so they were digging in the to tear down the wall, but it looks like the mine's caving in on them. From down here, we can make the whole wall collapse. Oh yeah, boss, but how do we get out? Some humor. Goblin Hero. Jeez, that's one of the ugliest looking goblins I have ever seen. They attacked in an orgy of rage and madness. Well, in the legend set with the turtle, we saw sex in the flavor text, so this is probably one of the only cards that has the word orgy in it. They attacked in an orgy of rage and madness, but only one seemed as focused on killing us as on the sheer joy of battle. 3 mana 2/2. Not good for a goblin's turn. There are plenty of other 3 mana 2/2 goblins that do a lot more damage. Or not do a lot more damage, but have a lot better effects than having no effects at all. Goblin Rock Sled. 2 mana 3/1 with trample. They cannot attack unless the opponent has 1 mountain. They do not untap as normal during your untap step if you attacked with them. I did not know that card existed. Goblin Rocks. Like, I was expecting, because I didn't focus on the artwork right away, I was expecting them to be sliding on like another rock or something, but he has a literal sled, like he's in Cool Runnings. Goblin Shrine. All right, this is the one I was talking about because this was in my first goblin deck. If Enchanted Lands is a mountain, all goblins get +1 attack. Goblin Shrine does 1 damage to all goblins if it leaves play. I knew it weren't no ordinary pile of, from Norin the Wary. Goblins are doing a tribal dance, making them more aggressive and dangerous. Goblins of the Flarg. 1/1 Mountain Walk. Goblins of the Flarg are buried if controller has any dwarves. So goblins are the most prevalent creature type for red, and they live in the mountains. And goblins, almost in every fantasy setting, goblins and dwarves are always fighting each other, mainly because they both live in the mountains for resources, territory. Goblins are always viewed as the villains too. Goblin Wizard, 4 mana 1/1. You can tap it to take a goblin from your hand and put it onto the battlefield. You can also pay a red. Target goblin gains protection from white until end of turn. So this card really had an advantage against white. And the fact that you can put any goblin from your hand directly onto the battlefield, this is a very powerful card. How much is it worth? $52. Magic would make more bigger goblins, where I mean bigger is in their power and toughness is larger and their casting cost is more than 4. This way, this Goblin Wizard is able to cheat them out. There are also cards in Magic that let you change the creature type, like the text of a creature type. So with this card, you could say giant. Take a giant from your hand and put it directly on the battlefield. Dragons. Take a dragon from your hand and put it on the battlefield. So that would combo with this card quite well. Grave Robbers, 3 mana, 1/1. Pay a black and tap them. Take an artifact from any graveyard and remove it from the game. You gain 2 life. I did not know this card existed. That's pretty good. I like this villainous guy. He's like, hey, look what we found, dude. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. It's a proverb. But it makes sense. What good are your material objects if you can't physically enjoy them? Hidden Path, 2 and 4 green. All green creatures gain Forest Walk. Where moments before we were lost beyond hope, the strange floating lights showed us the way and restored our morale. From Vervamon the Elder. Kind of a risky card, because if you're playing green and you're giving all green creatures Forest Walk, if your opponent has any green creatures, then they're going to be unblockable, just as yours are. Holy Light, for 1 white and 2, all non-white creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Bathed in halo light, the infidels looked upon the impurities of their souls and despaired. From the Book of Ta. Not sure what the artwork is depicting, but giving white is able to like have a miniature token wipe, because most tokens are 1/1s. If they're not white, this could remove them from the battlefield by killing them with only 1. Any creature with 1 toughness that isn't white will die to Holy Light. White doesn't get many cards like these. Inferno, 5, 6, 7. Inferno does 6 damage to all creatures and players. Any scrap of compassion that still existed in my soul was permanently snuffed out when they cast me out into the flames. Marisol called the Pretender. I don't know if they have a card of Marisol, but shows up a lot in these flavor texts. This poor hound's being lit on fire. I assume this was a metal statue that's melting, and this guy's already roasted. Inquisition, 3 mana. Look at target player's hand. Inquisition does 1 damage to them for each white card in their hand. Oh, that guy's getting questioned. Don't stab me. Many of those entrusted to the Primita Delphine's care tended to express themselves with screams. If your opponent's not playing white, it's not really a good. I mean, it's not really a good card to begin with. You get to look at their hand, but it doesn't do anything else after that if they're not playing white. Knights of Thorn, 4 mana, 2/2 protection from red and banding. With a great cry, the goblin host broke and ran as the first wave of knights penetrated its ranks. Tivadar of Thorn, History of the Goblin Wars. Four mana to get protected from red. Not really. The artwork is good, but not really anything else. If it's not against red, it's an over-expensive knight. Land Leeches, 2 mana, 2/2 first strike. The standard cure for leechers requires the application of burning embers. Alternative methods must be devised should an ember of sufficient size prove more harmful than the leech. Yeah, leeches are crazy. They're kind of scary. All parasites are scary. The fact that they're leeches later on in Magic would be black. I think they actually made one for each color in the Invasion block, but that'll come much later in the series. Giving them first strike is pretty unique for green. And again, Quentin Hoover knocks it out of the park with his artwork for these green cards. Leviathan. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 mana. 10/10 trample. When he enters the battlefield, where he enters the battlefield tapped and he does not untap as normal during the untap step. You have to sacrifice 2 islands during your untap step to untap him, and he cannot attack unless you sacrifice 2 islands. So you have to really make sure that you have enough lands and islands to be able to use them efficiently. He is a game winner, so to speak, but he does have a really heavy cost, or I should say it does. Even if you cheat him out onto the battlefield, you won't be able to use him unless you have islands. Living Armor. 4 mana, you tap it. Sacrifice Living Armor to put a plus X toughness counter on target creature where X is the target creature's casting cost. Though it affords excellent protection, few don this armor. The process is uncomfortable and not easily reversed. The card sounds familiar, like from one of the cards we reviewed earlier. Lurker, 3 mana, 2/3. Lurker may not be the target of any spell unless it was declared as an attacker or a blocker this turn. Excuse me. Each night we felt it watching us from the darkness beyond our fire. We only had 1 pack horse left. Maven Odana, Memoirs of a Soldier. This is something that looked like it would be in black instead of green. It's a beast. Mana Clash for 1 red. You and target player each flip a coin. Mana Clash does 1 damage to any player whose coin came up tails. Repeat this process until both players come up with heads at the same time. Oh my gosh, I did not know that card existed. It'd be great in a coin flip deck. Especially with Krark's Thumb that lets you flip 2 coins and you ignore 1. Mana Vortex, 3 mana enchantment. Each player who controls a land sacrifices 1 land during their upkeep. If at any time there are no lands in play, Mana Vortex is destroyed. If you do not sacrifice a land when Mana Vortex is cast, it is countered. This card definitely makes the game not fun because no one will be able to play shuts them down to 1 land a turn, so to speak. And if they don't play a land, then they're still going to lose the land until they have no land left. But this affects you as well. If you use Mana Vortex, you need to build your deck around it, like with artifacts. Marsh Gas for 1 black. All creatures get -2 power until end of turn. Comes right out of the ground. If you can smell it, it's too late. Kiwi Bogsberry. That's funny. It's like a silent but deadly fart. Swamp farts. Speaking of swamp farts, we see who's doing the farting in the marsh. Marsh Goblins. 1/1 Swamp Walk. They count as a black and a red card. Even the other goblins race shun the marsh goblins thanks to certain unwholesome customs they practice. I don't know what that unwholesome custom is, but they can keep it to themselves. Marsh Viper, 4 mana, 1/2. If they damage an opponent, they get 2 poison counters. If an opponent ever has 10 or more poison counters, the opponent loses the game. All we had left were their black and bloated bodies. From Maven Odana, Memoirs of a Soldier. Marsh Viper is my favorite card from the set. It will probably be my favorite card of the set once the stream is over. I know I talked about Marsh Viper when I was reviewing Pit Scorpion from the Legends stream. Like I said it again, or I said it before, and I'll say it again. Snakes are my favorite animal, and I love cards that depict them. And I had Marsh Vipers in my poison deck, and I would give them abilities to where they were either unblockable or they would directly deal damage to the opponent, and then they would get 2 poison counters, and they'd eventually get 10 and die, even if they had over 100 life. A lot of good memories with this card. The artwork is really good. Once again, Ron Spencer. This card has everything I like about it. The snake, the artist. Just today's standard, the card is terrible. 4 mana for a 1/2 is not a good cost. And by itself, it's almost never going to survive attacking the opponent. But I hold the card dear to my heart because it did win me many games back in the day when I was still a Magic noob and my play group were almost the same. Martyr's Cry for 2 white. All white creatures are removed from the game. Players must draw 1 card for each white creature they control that they lost in this manner. It is only fitting that one such as I should die in pursuit of knowledge, from Vermon the Elder. And this guy is getting burned alive. It is weird that it is white, and white is... If you have your own white creatures out, if you need to draw cards, you're sacrificing your creatures. If you're up against another white deck, then I guess this is good if you really need to clear the battlefield. Did not know the card existed, though. Maze of Ith. It's a land. It doesn't tap for mana, but target attacking creature becomes untapped, and it does not deal or receive any combat damage. So any color could run this card since it's a land, and it would shut down an attacking creature. A very powerful card since it could not be countered. The only way it could be dealt with is if the land is destroyed itself. Merfolk Assassin. 2 blue. You can tap and destroy target creature that has Island Walk. Kind of looks cross-eyed. I guess he sank the ship. For him to be good, you would have to have a card that says target creature gains Island Walk until end of turn, and then he can destroy that creature. But by himself, he's terrible. Mind Bomb. 1 blue. Mind Bomb deals 3 damage to each player. All players may discard up to 3 cards from their hand. Each card they discard prevents 1 damage dealt to them from Mind Bomb. I like the artwork because it's like an atom bomb, but it's got a brain in the center. So it's a cool ability for blue to do. Blue doesn't deal direct damage a lot nowadays, but it was powerful for what it did. And it also offers discard options. Miracle Worker, I've never seen this card. 1/1 for 1 white. Tap him to destroy target enchantment card on a creature you control. Those blessed hands could bring Circes to even the most tainted soul. Sister Betji, Miracles of the Saints. Morale. All attacking creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. After Lexisi's speed, the knights grew determined to crush their ancient enemies clan by clan. From Tivadar of Thorn, the history of the Goblin Wars. Merc Dwellers, 4 mana 2/2. When attacking, they get +2 attack if they are not blocked. When Ragnaron unsealed the catacombs, he found more than the dead in their treasures. Are they zombies? Yeah, they are. So the artist who keeps drawing these very primitive drawings is Drew Tucker. Because I keep wanting to say this looks like the primitive one from before, and sure enough, Drew Tucker it is. I did own Merc Dwellers. They were in one of my first black decks as well. Nameless Race, 4 mana. They have Trample, but they have X as their power and toughness. Pay X life when Nameless Race enters the battlefield. When Nameless Race enters the battlefield, X may not be greater than the total number of white cards all opponents have in play and in their graveyard. So if they're not playing white, you can't even really use this card. Necropolis. 5 mana artifact. Oh, it's an artifact creature. It's a wall. I've never seen this card. 5 mana 0/1. It counts as a wall. For free, you can take a creature in your graveyard and exile it. Put X toughness counters on it where X is removed creature's casting cost. The artwork looks really cool. I would have used it back in the day, but nowadays I wouldn't find a use for the card. Niall Sylvain. Is he a legendary creature? No, he's a oaf. Triple green 2/2, pay 4 and tap it. Target creature is regenerated. This is his domain, and while you remain here, you must value all life as you value your own. I thought this was like a proper name, but apparently he's not a legendary creature. Orc General, 3 mana, 2/2. Tap him, sacrifice an orc or goblin to give all orcs +1/+1 until end of turn. Your army must fear you more than the enemy. Only then will you triumph. From Malga Flemtooth. So the orcs were a more humanoid race who was reflected with red, who lives up in the mountains. And some goblins would go to war with the orcs, and then if a greater power was involved, they would unite the orcs and the goblins. Lord of the Rings is one of the best examples of that. But a lot of times they were just at war with each other as the humans were. People of the Woods, for 2 green, they're a 1x. X is the number of forests controlled by People of the Woods controller. Their rain of arrows left only myself alive, cowering within a tree hollow. They did not even come out to loot the bodies. Drew Tucker again. Sometimes the primitive artwork looks scarier because these look like blotches of blood. And when I'm out in the woods, and because I do a lot of hiking, I'm not afraid of any animals, but if I come across a person, I'll go on guard because I don't know what those person's intentions are. No matter how innocent they look, I've watched one too many movies to know what can happen out in the woods. Pikemen, 2 mana 1/1, banding and first strike. As the cavalry bore down, we faced them with swords drawn and pikes hidden in the grass at our feet. Don't lift your pikes till I give the word, I said, from Mavino Da, Memoirs of a Soldier. Preacher, 3 mana, 1/1. Tap him to gain control of one of your opponent's creatures. The opponent chooses which creature you gain control of. If Preacher becomes tapped, you lose control of the creature. You also lose control of the creature if Preacher leaves the game. White, gaining control of target creature, not that common for the white ability. Normally that went to either blue, red, or black. Psychic allergy. Oh, this dude, he's definitely allergic. He looked like he has a shrimp allergy and he ate a bunch of shrimp. 5 mana. Choose a color when casting Psychic Allergy. During opponent's upkeep, Psychic Allergy does 1 damage to that opponent for each card of that color he or she controls. Sacrifice 2 islands during your upkeep or Psychic Allergy is destroyed. I was about to say the card had to have some sort of drawback because it is a very powerful card. Lands are colorless, even like islands. They're not blue. They tap for a blue, but lands don't have a color. So, but there are other permanents they'd have out, like all their creatures or their enchantments. They would take 1 damage for each of those. A pretty powerful card, but does have its drawback if you can't keep up with this upkeep. Ragman, 4 mana 2/1, pay triple black and tap them. Look at target opponent's hand. If the opponent has any creature cards in it, they discard 1 of them at random. You can only use this ability during your turn. Oh, he's just a silly, dirty little man. What's to be afraid of? I don't know, the artwork looks really looming. He's going through the street. Look at his hands, first of all. These aren't regular human hands. And he looks like he's making his way to one of these homes. Whatever he is doing, we don't want to know. Reflecting Mirror, 4 mana. Pay X and tap it. Target spell which targets you targets a player of your choice instead. X equals twice the casting cost of the target spell. So you would need a ton of mana if it's a big spell. But I didn't know this card existed. It's a pretty good card defensively if you're against like red or blue and then black are the 3 biggest colors that target the opponent directly. Riptide. For 1 blue, all blue creatures become tapped. I guess these were animated skeletons that got caught in the Riptide. This set has a lot of same color hosing. I just noticed that. Rune Sword. For 6 mana, that's costly. Pay 3, tap it. Target attacking creature gets +2 power until end of turn. Any creature damaged by that creature cannot be regenerated, and if a creature goes to the graveyard, they are exiled from the game. If target creature leaves play before the end of the turn, the Rune Sword is destroyed. Very costly, and the fact that if the creature that the Rune Sword targeted dies, you have to sacrifice the sword. Not good at all. Safe Haven. It's another land that doesn't tap for anything. You pay 2 and tap it. Exile a target creature you control from the game. During your upkeep, you can sacrifice Safe Haven to return all creatures that have been removed from it and put it back on the battlefield. So if you have a Wrath of God or some sort of spell that destroys all creatures in play, and you have your own creatures out, you can use Safe Haven to temporarily remove those creatures, and then when all the creatures that you don't want to die or have been safely exiled with Safe Haven, then you use your board wiping spell. You cast Wrath of God, destroy all your opponent's creatures, and then once the battlefield's clear, you can sacrifice Safe Haven and put your creatures back on the battlefield. But the fact that the land doesn't tap for anything kind of lowers its power level by a lot. Savon Elves. For 1 green, you can pay 2 green, tap, target enchanted land is destroyed. Do they destroy land? Destroy target aura attached to a land. All right, that's what it's been errated as. Self is playing with spiders. I like spiders. Purity of the magic can only come from purity of the land. How can a meal nourish if the ingredients are spoiled? Sedain of Savine. That's a good quote, though. Scarecrow. Cool looking card. 5 mana, 2/2. Pay 6 and tap it until end of turn. All damage done to you by flying creatures is reduced to 0. That's cool because it pretty much, instead of the creatures attacking you, they are scared by the Scarecrow instead. There was more malice in its button eyes than should have been possible in something that had never known life. Scarecrows are more scarier for people now than they are crows. They're all over the place in mainstream horror now. Scarwood Bandits. 4 mana, 2/2 Forest Walk. Pay 3 and tap them. Take control of target artifact. The opponent may pay 2 mana to counter this ability. You lose control of that artifact if Scarwood Bandits leaves play. Giving green the ability to steal an artifact, that's unique. I don't know any other green card that does that currently. But if your opponent can pay 2, then that ability is countered. But you can try again on the next turn. Scarwood Goblins. 2 mana, 2/2, a red and a green. Larger and more cunning than most goblins, Scarwood Goblins are thankfully found only in isolated pockets. These guys are better than the Mirkwood Goblins by far. Scarwood Hag. 2 mana, 1/1. This should be a black creature or a black green. Pay quadruple green and tap it. Target creature gains Forest Walk until end of turn. You can tap it to give target creature loses Forest Walk until end of turn. Ugly card. And not good either. Scavenger. Speaking of ugly cards, we got Scavenger Folk. Pay a green, tap it, sacrifice them to destroy target artifact. String, weapons, wax, or jewels, it makes no difference. Leave nothing unguarded in Scarwood. Green and red and white all like to destroy artifacts. Season of the Witch. This card is awesome just by the artwork alone. We got some trees here. Like I said, ash has covered the sky, so there is no daylight here. At the end of each player's turn, all of his untapped creatures that did not attack this turn are destroyed. If you do not pay 2 life during your upkeep, Season of the Witch is destroyed. It's also like a Skull Grimace from the Ash Clouds. Pretty good card. Sisters of the Flame. 3 mana, 2/2, tap it, add 1 red to your mana pool. This ability is played as an interrupt. We are many wicks, sharing a common tallow. We feed the skies with the ashes of our prey. So we got Brothers of Fire and Sisters of the Flame. I thought the artwork was pretty cool. I assume it's a witch, shaman. She's obviously in front of a campfire, or there's a campfire in front of her. We can tell by the red glow in front of her face. I thought the artwork was very well done, and I'm terrible with drawing people, especially faces. So the art might be outdated nowadays, but I think it looks phenomenal. When I first saw the card, I almost thought it was a real photograph. That's how good it was. Power-wise, red does not have a lot of mana ramp abilities. So this is a unique one of them. It's pretty cool. Skull of Orm. Oh, that's a cool skull. One of the coolest skulls I've ever seen. 3 mana to cast. 5 mana tap. Bring 1 enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. Though lifeless, the skull still possessed a strange power over the flow of magic. There weren't many cards back in the day that let you bring an enchantment back. But the skull let you do it, and any color could use it. Sorrow's Path. Never seen this card. Tap it. Exchange control of 2 opponents' blocking creatures. This exchange may not cause an illegal block. Sorrow's Path deals 2 damage to you and 2 damage to each creature you control whenever it is tapped. So if an opponent blocks with 2 creatures, you can switch those blocking creatures with whatever they originally blocked. But it has such a huge drawback. And it's a land that doesn't tap for any mana. Spitting Slug. This is better than Giant Slug. 3 mana, 2/4. You can pay a green and a colorless to give it first strike until end of turn. If this ability is not activated, all creatures blocking or blocked by Spitting Slug gain first strike until end of turn. Definitely a larger slug than Giant Slug, since the power and toughness is better. I like the artwork on it, and I did have this card in my green deck too. My first one. Squire, 2 mana, 1/2. Of 20 year of age he was, I guess he, of his stature he was of even lengthy, and wonderly deliver and greet of strength, from the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. This guy looks way older than 20-something. Alright, this is the last page. Standing Stones. For 3 mana, you cast it. You pay 1, tap it, pay a life, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This ability is played as an interrupt. Effects that redirect this loss of life can't be used. The fact that you pay a colorless to add that 1 mana of any color to your mana pool and a life kind of sucks. But if you really, really need 1 mana of any color, then it is worth it. I did not know it existed. Stone Calendar. Amy Weber likes to draw. This is her art style. It's always in front of a starry night, and it always has like a festival theme to her artwork. 5 mana. Your spells cost up to 1 colorless less to cast. Casting cost of your spells cannot go below 0. I didn't know this card existed. It's okay. The Pretender Marisol ordered a great calendar drawn up to show when the path to the Darklands were strongest. If you're spending 5 mana, though, just to make all your other spells cost just 1 less, I don't think that's worth it in the long run. Sunken City. For 2 blue, all blue creatures get +1/+1. If you're not paid 2 blue during your upkeep, Sunken City is destroyed. Blue did not have a lot of enchantments that boosted all their creatures at once. So this is a very good blue card. If you're using creatures, a lot of creatures like merfolk or fairies that are generally weaker and you use their sheer numbers to beat the opponent, Sunken City is a good card. I used it a lot when I used those creature decks. Tangled Kelp. Well, this is a merfolk getting tangled in kelp. What kind of merfolk gets tangled in kelp? Like, if this was a person, then yeah, I could see it because they're not used to swimming. But anyway, it costs a blue. Target creature does not untap during its controller's untap step if it attacked during its controller's last turn. Target creature becomes tapped when Tangled Kelp is cast. The Fallen. This artwork is really good. 4 mana, 2/3. During its controller's upkeep, the Fallen does 1 damage to each opponent it has previously damaged. Magic often masters those who cannot master it. Let's read what it's been updated to. At the beginning of your upkeep, the Fallen deals 1 damage to each opponent and Planeswalker. Oh, they added the Planeswalker that it has dealt damage to this game. That's pretty good. The mana cost is a little high for its 2/3, and it doesn't have any other like combat abilities. But it just has to hit the opponent once, and then you could just let it sit there, and it'll just keep hitting the opponent for 1 each time. Or now Planeswalkers. I'll have to explain Planeswalkers much later in the stream series because Planeswalker wasn't even a card for Magic's first like 20 sets or so. Tividar's Crusade. For 3, all goblins are destroyed. Oh, that goblin really got freaking sacrificed. And this guy's like, "Rawr, we did it." Tividar, they were Tividar would eventually get a card in Magic's future. I want to say Future Sight. Hey, Vinny. I agree. Some of them are. Vinny, you missed Tackle Maggot from Legends last week. I reviewed your favorite card, Tackle Maggot. But anyway, Tividar of Thorn, Tividar and his knights, they would always be at war with the goblins. Tormod's Crypt. This was a competitively powerful card because it totally, first of all, it costs nothing to cast. You can tap it and sacrifice it to remove all cards in target player's graveyard from the game. The dark openings seem to breathe the cold, damp air of the dead earth in a steady rhythm. It had a variety of uses. If you used All Hallows Eve, where you bring all graveyards back to life, using Tormod's Crypt on your opponent means they get nothing and you get all your stuff back. You don't have to risk them having any dangerous creatures get resurrected. If also your opponent is playing a deck that relies on reviving creatures from their graveyard, Tormod Crypt will totally just like rip the spine out of their deck and they won't be able to really do anything dangerous. Definitely one of the best counters to any kind of deck that uses the graveyard to its advantage. Tower of Corial? I don't know how to say that. 2 mana, tap it. Target creature cannot be blocked by walls until end of turn. It's a weird looking card. It's just a weird card in general. Tracker. 3 mana, 2/2. You pay 2 green and tap them. Tracker does an amount of damage equal to its power to target creature. Target creature does an amount of damage equal to its power to tracker. Eventually, this ability would show up in red and green a lot, and it would get the keyword fight. Now, it looks like daylight in this for this card, but it kind of looks like winter, but it's not snowing just yet. Or there might be snow on the ground. But that is a prelude to one of the sets that are going to come soon after the dark. Uncle Istvan for 4 mana. He's a 1/3. All damage dealt to him by creatures is reduced to 0. Solitude drove the old hermit insane. Now he only keeps company with those he can catch. He's not even legendary? He has to be legendary. With a name like Uncle Isfan. Anyway, black getting a creature that doesn't take any, that all damage dealt is reduced to 0 by creatures. I think the only other black creature that's like that is Wall of Shadows. I do own Uncle Isfan, but I've never really used him in a deck. Venom. All non-wall creatures, target or enchanted creature blocks or is blocked by are destroyed at end of combat. This gives any creature the Basilisk ability, I like to call it. I told him it was just a flesh wound, a wee scratch, but the next time I looked at him, poor Tag was dead and gone. Snake bit this person. They will be dead soon. Wand of Ith. Ith would get a card much, much later in Magic's future. Pay 3 and tap it. Look at one card at random from target player's hand. If that card is not a land, target player must choose to either discard it or pay an amount of life equal to its casting cost. If the card is land, the player can discard it or pay 1 life. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. It can only be used during its controller's turn. War Barge. 4 mana. You pay 3, target creature gains Island Walk until end of turn. If War Barge leaves play, that target creature is destroyed. Remember when I was saying with that Merfolk Assassin that you need a card to give target creature Island Walk? Well, they made the combo in the same set. It's not a game-breaking combo, but it is a combo nonetheless. Water Worm. For 1 blue, this is the smallest worm in Magic's existence because most worms are big, big creatures. Water Worm gets +1 toughness if an opponent controls at least 1 island. Ooh, if they have an island, you get a 1/2 for 1 blue. Big deal. The only reason I like this card is because Ron Spencer did the art, but that's the only reason I like it. Whippoorwill. 1 green, 1/1. This doesn't even have flying. It's a bird that can fly, for crying out loud. But I guess it can't fly sky high, so that's why it doesn't have flying, unless it was an oversight. 2 green and tap it. Until end of turn, target creature cannot regenerate, and damage done to target creature may not be prevented or redirected. If target creature goes to the graveyard, it is removed from the game instead. If the Whippoorwill remains silent, the soul has not reached its reward. That's an interesting card for green, though. Witch Hunter. I like this card a lot. I used it in a lot of decks back in the day. 4 mana, 1/1. You can tap it to deal 1 damage to target player. That's a really unique ability for white. White did not have a lot of direct damage to the player. Pay 3 and tap him. Return target creature and opponent controls to their hand. Enchantments on that creature are destroyed. White did not have a lot of cards that return creatures to the owner's hand unless it's your own creatures. So this is a very unique ability for white and Witch Hunter. The artwork is pretty cool because the point of view is that you are the witch and the Witch Hunter is staring across from you and you're being burned at the stake. And either the Witch Hunter himself is evil or the fire from that is burning you is reflecting on his eyes. I know this is a reference also to the Salem witch trials, which made the witch hunters. The witch hunters were the true villains in that story. Well, in historical records, whatever you want to call it. So. But I like this card a lot. But Marsh Viper is still my favorite. That would be a close second, though. Word of Binding. 2 black and X. X target creatures become tapped. That was the worst experience of my days, standing there helpless as they killed my whole troop. It's a sorcery, so you could only use it on your turn. I guess if... It's a strong card, though, because... if your opponent has creatures to block, you can just use Word of Binding, tap all their creatures. They have nothing to block with, and you can full swing. And if they don't have any spells to stop your creatures, you're probably going to win the game at this point. Worms of the Earth. This guy's going to get goosed. This worm's going to get him right in this where the sun don't shine. 5 mana enchantment. No land may enter the battlefield. During any player's upkeep, any player may destroy Worms of the Earth by sacrificing 2 of their lands or taking 5 damage. The ground collapsed, leaving nothing but the Great Worm's mucus residue. So, at worst, your opponent can't play lands anymore, but that means you can't either. Your opponent destroys 2 of their lands, putting them behind mana-wise, unless you're really, really late in the game. Or they take 5 damage for 5 mana. Because this is an enchantment, this card would combo very well with that one card that brought enchantments back from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, the skull. It was the artifact that did that, the skull of whoever. Wormwood Treefolk. 4/4 for 5 mana. Benny, if you're still there, it's a Treefolk. Two green, Wormwood Treefolk gains Forest Walk on end turn, but then he does 2 damage to you. You can do the same for black, and he gives Swamp Walk on turn. He does 2 damage to you. The artwork's pretty cool. The fact that it could be unblockable against other green or black is pretty versatile. So the card doesn't suck, but it is outdated by today's standards. And this concludes the dark. So I'm going to click back to Marsh Viper and do my closing statements. Scrolling. I'll just search for Marsh Viper if I can. There we go. They gave us the revised version, the white bordered version. Ugh, ugly. But regardless, Marsh Viper was my favorite card from the dark. Things will get a lot more darker for Dominaria's future as we continue down the line from Magic the Gathering's set releases. I like the dark very much as a set because I am intrigued to darkness. Horror is one of my favorite genres of video game and movies. And there was a lot of animals that I like representing the set. Snakes, sharks. Ron Spencer did a lot of the artwork. I think this is probably his debut in the art team, and he would stick around for a while. So overall, the dark was probably, out of all the sets that I've reviewed so far, the dark has been my favorite one to review. And then Legends would come second. Ironically, the original set from Magic, Alpha, is to this date one of my least favorite sets. But that's also because I rarely ever used any of those cards. Those cards, if I did have them, they were the reprinted versions, or I used them digitally. Magic had a PC game, I think, that came out in 1997 that had every set up to that point that you can use in like a storyline format. But other than that, this concludes our setting for the dark. I think the next set is Falling Empires. Let me double check. Actually, I can just check through here. Next set we're going to review is, because I'm skipping all sets where it's all reprints. Fallen Empires is the next set to reveal. Ugh. Fallen Empires has a bad taste in my mouth, but I'll get more into that in the next stream. So if you like the dark, or if you had memories from cards or strategies from any of the cards that I've revealed from the set, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video as always, and tune in next week as we see which empires have fallen during this worldwide cataclysm in Magic the Gathering. Have a good night and take care. And don't be afraid of the dark.